You don't know who Malcolm X is? Okay, that's okay.
I have no idea who that person is.
You don't know who Malcolm X is? Okay. Do you know who Malcolm X is?
No. What?
Malcolm Little was an African American activist and leader in the civil rights movement. He was a Muslim as well as member of an organization called the Nation of Islam, which is a political group focused on improving lives for Black Americans. Malcolm would later start his own group called the Muslim Mosque, Inc. A year before his death, Malcolm X made the journey to Mecca, and this changed his views completely. On his journey, he met and became close friends with white men, and this made him realize not all white men were bad. He returned to the United States after his journey with a new outlook on integration. Toward the end of his life, Malcolm spoke to all races about equality, justice, and the need to respect each other. From the beginning of his life, Malcolm had no experience with freedom. He grew up during a time when segregation was the norm in America. His father was killed by white supremacists, and as a result, his mother had a serious mental breakdown and was hospitalized. She never recovered. This had terrible consequences for Malcolm and his family. Malcolm entered the foster care system at the age of 6. Because his family was broken up and because he lived during a time of segregation and racism, life was extremely hard for young Malcolm. Although Malcolm was at the top of his class, he was told he could not achieve his dream of becoming a lawyer simply because he was Black. In the 1950s, very few Black men were accepted into college and even fewer into law school because of their race. He therefore dropped out of school after 8th grade and ended up in jail by the time of age 21. When Malcolm was released from jail, he was a converted Muslim and became part of a group called the Nation of Islam. Some of the social issues during this time centered around marginalized groups, including women, people with disabilities, and people living in poverty. Racism and segregation were probably the most dominant social issues during this time, especially since racism also affected many of the people in other marginalized groups. Malcolm X became part of the civil rights movement in the early 1960s. He was one of the millions of Blacks demanding change in America. Malcolm was a master debater, and he was known for his participation in a number of debates on the radio, television programs, and universities about equal rights. He also led the Unity Rally in Harlem on June 29, 1963. This was one of the nation's largest civil rights events. Malcolm had a different philosophy than Martin Luther King Jr., but they were in agreement on many issues. Although they only met once, it is widely believed that Malcolm X's leadership was beneficial to the work of Dr. King because of his ideas about Black pride. When Malcolm returned from his trip to Mecca, he preached that racism had corroded the spirit of America and that only Blacks could free themselves. Malcolm founded the Organization of Afro-American Unity in June 1964, and his ideas moved increasingly in the direction of socialism. Malcolm X was assassinated in New York on February 21, 1965, by members of a group of rival Black Muslims. Here is an interview of Malcolm showing some of his views.
And what form will the activities of these various so-called invisible movements take in Harlem this summer?
An example, Commissioner Murphy. Almost every statement that Commissioner Murphy makes would give you the impression that he's encouraging the police, rank-and-file policemen, that to take whatever method or measures necessary to hold the Negroes in check. He feeds the type of statistics to the white public to make them think that Harlem is a complete criminal area, that everyone is prone toward violence. This gives the police the impression that they can then go and brutalize the Negroes or suppress the Negroes or even frighten the Negroes. Whenever something happens, 20 police cars converge on one area. This doesn't frighten Negroes. So it means that someone is either misinforming Commissioner Murphy and making him use tactics this year that he would not use 4 years ago, or that the former policeman Kennedy would not use. And this force that is so visible in the Harlem community creates a spirit of resentment in every Negro. They think they're living in a police state and they become hostile toward the policeman. They think that the policeman is there to be against them rather than to protect them. And these thoughts, these frustrations, these apparitions automatically are sufficient to make these Negroes begin to form means and ways to protect themselves in case the police themselves get too far out of line.
Malcolm X was a huge activist for black rights and contributed greatly to the ideal of equal rights. He believed black people were equal and should have the same rights as white people. He encourages blacks to fight back when attacked. Malcolm preached pride, which added greatly to the Black Power movement of the 1960s. Even though the fight for social justice and equality is far from over, Malcolm's legacy will continue to live on in America as people stand up for what is right and speak out against the evils of racism.